Welcome to Radar Talk, a video channel in which we invite experts working in the field of major projects to come and talk about ideas and best practice in the field of collaboration. Today we have Giles Henday, partner in CPC Project Services. Giles is a highly experienced project manager. He's been involved in a number of major projects over his 30-year career, and we thought it would be interesting to get his thoughts on and views on collaboration, what he's seen, changes he's seen in the industry over that time, and how he sees the future. So Giles, perhaps that's the right place to start. Looking back over your career, how do you see the collaborative landscapes changed in that time?
Yeah, Tony, it's a really good question, and yeah, certainly over the period that I've been working as a project manager and program manager, and in different sectors and different industries, I've actually been able to compare how that's evolved over that period. So, I mean, if we wind back now to the sort of early 90s, when the introduction of the NEC contract started to come into effect on a lot of the major projects, everybody was obviously understanding the intent of the NEC contract compared to how contracts were managed previously. But because of their past history of the people that were running the contracts, it took quite a while for that to really start to take hold and move towards the original collaborative intent.
Right.
That was basically the main reason for that contract being brought about. And of course we've come a long way since then. People have obviously retired and younger people have come into the industry, and their way of managing in a collaborative working environment is probably quite refreshing in different sectors.
Okay, that's good.
And I think if you look at the different sectors, you could probably do a study and almost test which ones are more collaborative and which ones are less collaborative, and we probably shouldn't get into that too much, but I've got a few different examples from different sectors that we could run through and maybe just compare over my history if you want to do that.
That'd be great.
Yeah, so one of the projects I had going back to the sort of early 2000s now was the Piccadilly Line extension. I was the project manager there for what was the PPP partner in London Underground called Tube Lines, and we actually had there a tripartite contract and effectively a collective objective to extend the Piccadilly Line to the new Terminal 5 at Heathrow that was being built. So that was really quite interesting because you've got three parties with different certainly contractual elements of what they were trying to achieve, but the objectives were the same, and we obviously tried to have a very strong objective about what we were trying to achieve, which was obviously the Piccadilly Line running to T5 and having that critical mission that I've been involved with. So not long after that, sort of in around 2008, I got involved with setting up the Smart Motorways programme with the Highways Agency, as it's now called.
Right, okay.
Yeah, and in those early days, really we were taking almost a concept. So there had been a trial of a smart motorway around Birmingham, and we were trying to work out, well, how do we actually expand this across the whole of the country into all the different regions that are part of Highways Agency back then and Highways England now. And that was a really big challenge because it was new technology about how we operate motorways and the equipment that needs to go on them, and effectively the road works that needs to take place.
So it was a lot more than just a pure construction contract.
Yes, it was a whole new concept. But the very interesting thing there was the very open approach that the Highways Agency managers and leaders took in setting all of that up. I was actually part of the PMO that was helping set that up. In fact, I was leading that. And one of the key tools that we probably used to help the collaboration was a joint risk register exercise right in the early days. Another key thing to understand is the contract though, which while they were NEC contracts, what was created was a shared incentive pool. So 4 main contractors were given different regions, and they actually all shared in an incentive pool with Highways Agency. So that drove all the right behaviours, both financially and contractually, right at those front-end early planning stages. And I mean, for people that don't know, Highways England have kept that mission going, and have actually been very much at the forefront of developing, I believe, the collaborative working arrangements in the industry ever since then.
I've noticed that.
So that really was a groundbreaking arrangement, I believe. And the risk register, which is a similar technique to what Resonate's used to actually drive that collaboration in the early phases, is actually a good way of doing it, because when you're trying to be collaborative, you do have to acknowledge the strengths and weaknesses of all the parties. And while you can write a charter and you can have some nice meetings, actually getting down to the specific risks and deciding who's going to mitigate them before you launch into going to build a new motorway or whatever it happens to be is a really good way of starting out, because you're starting to work some of the difficult stuff that you're going to have to deal with and sorting it out before you go and start building things and designing things.
Before it gets difficult.
So it's getting all of those things in the right order. And you quite quickly see if people are trying to do that collaboratively, or if you haven't got some team players in there and they're not doing it, or they're referring back to the contract and starting to protect their commercial positions. That becomes evident quite quickly if you do that process. So yeah, definitely I would recommend that. That worked really well.
And so any other examples do you think are worth talking about?
Yes, I mean, I think just again going through my history, I then actually had quite an interesting period after the motorways in tube lines again. So this again was the privatised part of London Underground, running the Jubilee, Northern and Piccadilly lines that TfL had just bought back after its first period of PPP, and they bought that back from private ownership. And actually one of the key things that had to be sorted out there were the Jubilee and Northern Line upgrades, which actually via the previous arrangement were not going very well, let's say. And one of the key things to try and sort that out that was used was just very repeatedly saying we're all one team. And while that sounds rather corny, if you say it often enough and then you actually go around and start to survey and test people's view of what one team means, which is of course different to everybody in a contracting organisation or an operating organisation, if you keep on with a sort of an ethos like that, that actually can help turn things around. It obviously wasn't the only thing that changed people's minds about the project and actually got them to deliver it. And those are very difficult, complex projects to deliver, but it was certainly a key thing that just ran all the way through. Yeah. Again, that was an NEC contract, and without going into details, a lot of commercial issues were involved. So again, it's about getting people to understand the overall mission that they're trying to achieve, using some simple language for most of the people involved, and in the background trying to sort out the contractual issues, because that was a project that was in trouble and needed to be sorted out. So we weren't starting with a nice clean sheet of paper and establishing that collaboration. It already gone wrong. It was trying to rescue it and get it to a better place. So that was all quite interesting, and you start to understand then what really achieves success is the way people work together. It's not the contract, but that can actually be something that sets the scene either well or badly, depending on how it's done. And at the end of the day, it all comes down to people. And on big projects and programs, it has to be all about people. I mean, if you look at 2012 and what we achieved with the Olympics, I think everybody would say, yeah, that was an amazing achievement for the UK. And maybe a lot of us thought we wouldn't be able to achieve it, but we did. It was all brilliant. And actually, TfL played a big part in that. I also played a part in that as well.
So, looking at more recent projects, I understand you're involved in the station capacity upgrade and work at Bank Station?
Yes, actually I had an interesting role for London Underground, overseeing actually all of the big station capacity upgrades. So that was Victoria, Tottenham Court Road, Bond Street, and then in sort of slightly later stages of development, the Bank Station capacity upgrade. So one of my roles was to sort of try and get a consistent approach and lessons learned from the earlier projects into the likes of Bank Station capacity upgrade, and that was quite an interesting mixture of lessons learned that we were trying to get in there. But some of them were certainly around the people management aspects and the collaboration. And so for an example, we actually tried to roll out a behavioural management training to a lot of the lead teams on those projects, which was based on behavioural science, and it was actually how to address in particular safety issues across the whole of those different projects. And some of our main contractors that we often work with, they're very strong on those particular approaches, and it is all about all people collaborating in terms of dealing with safety issues. And it does actually come down to behavioural science. It's quite difficult to apply it, but I believe in future we need to sort of also think about that as part of a solution that could help collaboration. In terms of bank station upgrade though, for those that aren't aware, an interesting procurement approach was developed, and actually CPC helped London Underground develop that, where actually the Tier 1 and the Tier 2 supply chain was actually involved in the tendering, and they were actually tendering against a business case and trying to improve the business case rather than lowest cost or some form of scope that was completely tied down. So without going into too much detail, but that particular procurement process then created some very good, strong collaborative behaviours going forwards once the contract was awarded. And I think if we then look a little bit at how that can help us in the future, again, it's a little bit like the Highways Agency example, where if you start to create the right behaviours and the right contractual setting, even right at the tendering and procurement stage, you can really achieve some amazing things. And a lot of it is about how you get people to work together. And so some of the work that also has been done in relation to the bank station upgrade has been actually effectively communications network modelling by UCL and Dr. Stephen Pryke and Simon Ederman, and they've actually recently presented at Resolex actually the roundtable discussion that went into the details of what they did there. So they've developed that really into an industry-wide offering about how you understand the importance of communication networks within large major projects and programs, and they have a way of modelling that. So I think if we combine the ideas of understanding behavioural science, how that affects people's behaviours, how we can understand and see as projects develop through their life cycle the communication patterns which are different to the organisational hierarchy, which is actually just a sort of a picture on the wall. The organisational networks and who talks to who to get stuff done is actually far more useful and important to understand. And then of course the work that Resolex is doing, which is trying to bring in the sort of risk approach to understanding how collaboration is evolved through a project, and the parties that are interested in those various risks using the radar process. I think there's a whole suite of tools and solutions that we as project managers and program managers can make use of in the future, and that's why CPC are very keen on promoting all of these different solutions. It's a toolkit for achieving collaborative working in the future, and we just need to keep advancing that science, I believe.
Giles, that's great. Thank you very much for your time.
Okay, thank you, Tony.